Unspoken Issues.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Unspoken Issues podcast. We have an unspoken epic. This is what we call these, right?
Oh, yeah.
Unspoken epics in store for you here. Right here on this podcast, sometimes we take a look at the forgotten stories that are out there. Sometimes we take a look at the weird ones. And then we take a look at some that are a bit bigger than anyone expected. And I think this falls in that category. We're talking Star Wars Shadows of the Empire. This was a 6-issue miniseries, landed in 1996. And somehow this thing is a lot bigger than just a comic. We're talking about pretty much a full-on multimedia experiment. They wanted to do everything that comes with a Star Wars movie without actually making a movie. We have a novel, we've got a Nintendo 64 game, we have an orchestral soundtrack, which I didn't know existed until a couple days ago. We have a toy line, of course, and then we have this comic here that focuses on the underworld side of things. All of this is set between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi in our Star Wars universe. That's right in that gap where Han Solo is frozen in carbonite, Luke's coming into his own. The Empire, though, still in firm control of everything. And that's where we're at here. We got a lot of bounty hunters. We got swoop gangs. We got double agents. A lot of stuff going on in the background. And some other things that are happening elsewhere in other media. So, of course, Chris Armstrong, this wasn't my idea. This was yours, buddy. So why don't you let the listeners know why we chose to do this one?
Well, I didn't actually think about this when I presented to you, but this is the 30th anniversary of this little event. It was 1996.
Right.
I've wanted to do this one for a while. Also, we have May the 4th, Star Wars Day every year. I wanted to coincide it with that. We did a May the 4th Unspoken Issues. So actually, I think it might have been a source material because me, Evan, and Al Sedano got together and talked about the first Marvel Star Wars arc that was back during the pandemic when we were doing some unspoken issues and source material when you were covered up with work stuff.
Right. Yeah.
And we had talked about this a little bit at that time for some reason. I don't remember specifically why we were talking about it. But that's pretty much the reason I wanted to talk about this for a while. This is a real oddity in Star Wars, I think. I don't really know what your history with Star Wars is. Star Wars has been like a part of my life since before I can remember. I don't remember the first time I watched any of the movies. I've just always been a fan of Star Wars.
Yeah.
But what about you? I know you're a couple years older than me, so I don't know.
Right.
You may have been old enough to see the first one in the theater. I was not.
I was old enough. I just didn't go back then. And it's interesting because, so my mom marries my stepdad at the time. Bob is his name, and she marries him in 87, I think, 86, late 86. And at that point, I knew what Star Wars was, but I really didn't start to grow an appreciation for what was out there until I started watching the movies with him. He was, I wouldn't call him a huge fan, but he was a fan enough to where he wanted to share that with me as a kid, and he just dug the whole sci-fi fantasy feel of it. And so at about that time, I started to watch the movies. Didn't exactly have them on VHS until much later. I think when the special editions dropped in 98, 99. Was it 99 when it was before the
they were in theaters in 97, so probably late 97 is when the VHS out, I'm guessing.
I remember getting those I got the trilogy on VHS. Oh man, I think it was for Christmas. But anyway, so yeah, at about that time I started digging into a little bit further as I went to college. My first year of college was in 96. Met a lot of Star Wars fans. Seems like there was quite a few on the floor that we were living in. And of course, you find those nerdy / geek culture guys, and we grouped together and we were like, oh yeah, let's watch these films. So, yeah, I got them on VHS. Let's watch them. But these were guys that were taking it to a whole other level. But at that time, I can remember my buddy handing me Dark Empire. and I read Dark Empire in 96, 97. And
we talked about that on one of the early Unspoken Issues. The first.
That's right. I owned the 32X Star Wars game. So if Sega Genesis 32X, I bought the Star Wars game for that, which was pretty fun. I do remember like getting exposed to the Wilford Brimley Ewok Adventures.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So I definitely knew of these movies, but I didn't really start having an appreciation for them until really the late '80s, early '90s, and then it snowballed from there. But yeah, I remember I took my stepdad for his birthday to go watch Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
And it was not it was not A New Hope. We'll just put it that way. It did not have the same impact for him as A New Hope did, but it was what it was. But yeah, there you go. I've always appreciated Star Wars, and you've talked Star Wars quite a few times. Didn't we do like a Boba Fett one at one point? It was a Boba Fett story with Tom Taylor did. I can't remember if it was me and you or if it was me and Mark.
Been Mark. I'm not certain I've done that.
It was a really good book. And I tweeted Tom Taylor afterwards. Well, I put a tweet out there and included him in it, but he noticed it and liked it. That was a really good story. So I've read plenty of other Star Wars. I've never read like any of the books, novelizations, or anything like that, but I've definitely, because I know there's the whole Thrawn stuff that's out there. I've never picked up a Thrawn book. Have you read any of those?
Yeah, I read the Heir to the Empire shortly after they were released in paperback when I was in high school or probably junior high, and then never finished reading that series.
Oh, really?
I think I read the first one and maybe most of the second one and then never finished. Although I'm actually in the process of rereading those books right now because I am a fan of those books. I just never finished reading them when I was younger. And I did read the Shadows of the Empire novel when I was in high school when it came out. Well, I've lost my train of thought.
Well, that's good you bring that up because I have a thing here at the end that was supposedly comparing the comic to the novel. Maybe you could just answer this right off the top, make sure everything that I was reading was correct. Do what we have here in the comic, does it like cover more stuff that's tangential to the story, or does this stuff that's in the comic happen in the novel?
It seems to be like there's a lot of stuff in this comic where it's like they'll reference, hey, Dash did this, so now we're able to do this. It's like, oh, well, that happened in the video game.
Yeah.
Or Lando did this. Oh, that happened in the novel, I guess.
Okay.
So the way they did this, they have all these different storytelling devices of the books, the comics, the game, and they all have a little bit of a slightly different perspective of the story. And some stuff happens only in certain venues or whatever. So that's interesting the way they do that. It's a little annoying in the comic because you feel like you're getting less. I think the novel is probably the base story, has most of it included in it. It's probably like the widest breadth of the story is included in the novel.
Okay.
And the other stuff seems to be more ancillary.
Yeah, that would be like your Civil War, and then this would be the Civil War tie-in. So, okay, I get it. Yeah,
I read that novel. That was probably the first hardcover novel I ever owned because as soon as it came out, I bought it and read it. And then I rarely reread books. I'll sometimes listen to audiobooks I've already read.
Right.
I actually reread the book probably 10 years ago. And I was like, man, this is not as good as I remembered it being.
Oh, yeah.
And then I actually listened because they released an audio book version, a new one recently. And I listened to that last year. So I've actually re-listened to that book about a year ago.
I remember the first Star Wars book that I owned, and that was the one that came with the record. I think it was related to the droids in some way. Like it was C-3PO and R2-D2, and you turned the page when R2-D2 made a sound.
Yep. Yeah, I had one of those. I think I had a couple. I'm sure they put out a billion of them. I think one of them that I had was a Return of the Jedi, and the other one I had was, I remember 3PO and R2 were on the cover, so it was probably the same one you're talking about.
Well, yeah, this comes out in 96, and I'm sure somehow I knew, but I knew definitely there was a Shadows of the Empire video game, and I honestly thought when I was getting ready to read this, I thought it was going to be like, oh, you're going to learn about, this is a visual representation of what happens in the video game. That is not the case, but the same character, the character's going to appear here. Did you say you ever played it or no?
Yeah, I did. I loved the video game. I did not have an N64, but I had a cousin who had one. And at one point, I had a PlayStation, he had an N64, and we just like traded.
Swap systems?
Yeah, for like a week or two.
Oh, nice.
I took my PlayStation and I took a N64, and I played a ton of Shadows of the Empire. I never beat the game. I actually bought another N64. Actually, it was gifted to me, I think, for Christmas from a buddy of mine. He bought me a secondhand one probably 10 or 12 years ago. And I've played Shadows of the Empire on that a handful of times, which I guess it's probably been 6 or 7 years since I've even touched that thing. But it was fun to go back and relive some of that video game.
Yeah,
I do have a little preamble just about, you covered some of it about what this whole project was. So it's 1996, Shadows of the Empire. It was like a Lucasfilm doing everything but the movie, like all the stuff that would go with a big movie release, like a video game tie-in, action figures, all that stuff. And it was seen as a dry run rollout of Star Wars product in advance of like the special editions and the prequels, because they were gearing up to do all that stuff later at the end of the 90s. And like I mentioned earlier, each storytelling venture featured a different perspective on the events of the story that was being told. So there was the novel written by Steve Perry, not the singer.
Not of Journey fame.
Yes, there were the comics, which include, after this series we're going to talk about, there was a sequel that focused on Guri, the droid that was Xizor's assistant, who had a much bigger role in the novel.
Let me just quickly step in here and say that I did not know how to pronounce Prince Xizor's name until I watched a commercial today. I want to see the commercial for like the game. There was a commercial for, I think it was for the game, where they actually said his name, and I was like, oh, I would have looked like a fool this whole podcast. But yeah, there were actually commercials for the whole thing, like talking about, and I don't know where they would have aired. I don't remember ever seeing them, but yeah, it was pretty much saying, okay, check out the book and check out the comic. Yeah. But anyway, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't remember. I think the novel might give the reader a good idea of how to say it at some point. I can't remember.
Okay.
Specifically, because I would never have known how to say it just as a 16-year-old reading that book. But I've always known. I don't know where maybe I also saw a commercial or heard an interview or something with somebody. But yeah. There were also mini comics included, I think, in the Micro Machines toys or something. So one of the toys had mini comics.
Cool.
And then there was another, I guess, sequel called Jabba's Run or something. I actually checked it. It is on the Marvel app. So now I'm going to have to read that too. But it focuses on some of the characters in the Jabba part of the story, like the...
Well, Jix.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some of those.
Okay.
Of course, the video game for N64, the soundtrack was produced by Joel McNeely, who had worked on, I believe, the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, who's part of the Lucasfilm stable.
Oh, okay.
Action figures by Kenner, and I didn't have any of those at the time. I've bought some vintage ones at toy stores and Comic Cons and stuff, so I've got a handful of them. And they recently put out a Dash Rendar and a Prince Xizor Black series.
Oh, really?
Picked up recently.
Those are pretty cool. There
was a trading card series by Topps that I really would like to get my hands on. I think the Hildebrandt brothers painted those cards. They were a big deal in the 90s. And then there was also a Shadows of the Empire source book that was part of the role-playing game for the Star Wars stuff.
Oh, really?
They did a lot of stuff for this, except for a movie. I've always hoped that, obviously, all this stuff is no longer canon since Lucasfilm was purchased by Disney and they decanonized almost everything. Dash Rendar was mentioned in one of the solo tie-in books when that movie came out. Prince Xizor has been referenced in some of the novels, I think, maybe some of the comics, but I don't think any of the original characters have actually appeared in anything since this. They've just been mentioned here and there in the newer canon stuff.
Yeah, I was looking that up too, and I saw where they Dash Rendar had been referenced in some way. And I don't know if they talked to the guy who did it. I feel like they did, and he was like, oh yeah, I might have done that. It sounded like he was trying to be sneaky, trying to make it so that, because the whole Legends stuff where they've decanonized things and they put it in the Star Wars Legends realm. So a lot of people a little salty on some of that stuff, especially if you look at the comments. Go ahead.
Yeah, one of my best friends, who was probably the biggest Star Wars fan I knew, at least when I was younger, he completely abandoned Star Wars once Disney bought it.
Wow.
And mostly because of that factor, because he loved the novels. He had a collection of dozens, if not over 100, of the different novels that had come out over the year.
Wow.
And he was so annoyed by that he was like, I've give up. I'll just watch the movies. Well, he hasn't watched any of the Disney movies as far as I know.
Yeah.
I know how some people feel. I don't feel that way, but I know how people can be about stuff like that.
Well, all right. Well, I'll get into the creative team here unless you got anything else before I jump into that.
I think that's it.
Okay. So the architect here, our writer, is going to be John Wagner, a legendary figure in British comics. Most of you probably know him as the co-creator of Judge Dredd, a character he had been writing for 2000 AD since 1978. By the time he got to Shadows, he had already proven he could handle gritty, high-stakes icons, having written Batman for DC in the late 80s and even orchestrating the high-profile Batman Judge Dredd Judgment on Gotham crossover in 1991. He was no stranger to the Star Wars universe either, having recently tackled the galaxy's most famous bounty hunter in Star Wars Boba Fett, Bounty on Barracuda, in late 1995. And then we have industry legend P. Craig Russell. He's doing inks, it looks like here. Russell's career goes all the way back to the early 70s at Marvel, where he made a name for himself on titles like Doctor Strange and War of the Worlds, Stories and Amazing Adventures. He's widely respected for his lyrical, detailed style, which he brought into high-concept projects like Michael Moorcock's Elric and Neil Gaiman's Sandman, specifically the famous Ramadan issue. Seeing a creator of his stature inking a Star Wars book was a clear signal that Shadows was intended to be a prestige project. The visual powerhouses, Killian Plunkett and John Nadeau. The penciling duties were shared by these two artists who had been cutting their teeth on some of Dark Horse's most intense sci-fi properties. Killian Plunkett came into Shadows fresh off a celebrated run on Alien's Labyrinth and the movie adaptation of The Mask. Joining him, John Nadeau, who had spent the early 90s working on FemForce with AC Comics before moving to Dark Horse to work on Aliens, Colonial Marines. Nadeau had already become a staple of the Star Wars line by 1996. And I think he continues to do this after, at least for a little bit after this story, X-Wing Rogue Squadron. And he was also part of the Boba Fett-centric Twin Engines of Destruction story in the Star Wars Galaxy magazine. And then Carrie Porter and David Copper. They round out the aesthetic here. Colorist Carrie Porter, who had been a prolific force at the publisher since 1994, coloring everything from Next Men to Aliens Berserker and the gritty superhero title X. He and Nadeau were already a proven team, having worked together on those earlier 1995 Boba Fett stories. Finally, the lettering was handled by David Cooper. Cooper's career began in the mid-'80s at Malibu Comics on titles like Elf Lord and Gun Fury. By the mid-'90s, he was a go-to letterer for Dark Horse's most prominent titles, including Grendel Tales and the aforementioned X. So, to preface this a little bit, we got to let everybody know some of the characters that are going to be showing up here and maybe give them a bit of an idea who these people are. I'll run through the main heroes. If you're a Star Wars fan, these names, I'm not going to have Chris explain them to you, but Chris, feel free to jump in if you need.
Now, who is Chewbacca?
Luke Skywalker is going. These are our main heroes here. We got Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, Chewbacca, Lando Calrissian, and Han Solo, who is still frozen in carbonite. Again, this takes place between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. So you got...
Oh, we'll be a roguish scoundrel, though. Don't worry about it.
Don't you worry about that. So if you've seen the movies, it's important to remember that we are in between those two movies as far as these character stories go. Now, our primary villains, we've already mentioned here. Darth Vader is definitely going to be a bit of a factor in this story. Emperor Palpatine is also going to be a force here. Boba Fett, one of the more popular villains that came out of the Star Wars franchise. And then this is one I think we ought to explain a little bit. That's Prince, we were called him Prince Xizor, right?
That's how I've always understood it to be pronounced.
Yeah, I think that's the way I heard it too. So can you give the listeners an idea of who Prince Xizor is?
Yeah, he's like the head of a vast criminal enterprise. I guess the biggest, almost like he's like the godfather of the Star Wars universe, sort of. He's heads the Black Sun criminal empire, which has a lot of legitimate businesses and not so legitimate. And he's sort of vying for the Emperor's attention. He kind of wants to take Vader's place at the Emperor's side and sort of usurp that position and be like the Emperor's right-hand man.
I mentioned earlier about double agents. He feels like he's definitely playing both sides. If it wasn't for the fact that we get a clear indication that he's definitely on the Emperor's side of things, but he's buddying up with the rebellion a little bit and trying to gain their trust. But yeah, I think the end game for Prince Xizor is to somehow end up, just like you said, in Vader's place. So yeah, there's some definite tension between those two. Now, as we get into our newcomers here, Dash Rendar. So
yeah,
give our listeners an idea of who Dash Rendar is.
Well, he's sort of a Han Solo clone, which, hey, being a Han Solo knockoff still puts you in the top 2% of fictional characters as far as I'm concerned. So he's from Corellia, much like Han Solo. He does have much bigger shoulder pads.
Mm-hmm. He does.
Which was the style of the time. He flies around in a similar Corellian ship to the Millennium Falcon called the Outrider, which looks not the exact same design, but it's got some similar features. And I always wanted that toy.
That figure? Oh, yeah.
I wanted to get a hold of one. Yeah.
Right.
Which they're pretty easy to find on eBay, but I don't want to pay $140 for one in the box.
Had a slave one in that run too, apparently.
Yeah.
Which Mike wouldn't mind having that either.
But Dash is sort of brought in to fill that Han Solo role in the collection of characters. And he's more of a episode 4 Han Solo, like before he joins the rebellion or stuff. He doesn't really care much about what's going on, but Lando knows him and he's doing favors for Lando and helping him out, but he's not really interested in like joining up with the rebellion full time. So he's more like the I'll take my reward and get out of here solo version from episode 4.
All right, and then we next have Guri, the advanced human replica droid. Is that right?
Yes.
And
gets the most of a short shrift in this comic series because she's a bigger part of the novel, definitely.
Is she?
Doesn't really have much to do in this from the perspective that the comic gives us. But yeah, she's advanced, obviously much stronger than a human because she's a droid. She has a lot of martial arts abilities and stuff. So yeah, a very dangerous character, but you don't really see that much in the comic.
No, I thought she was a servant at first. I was like, pretty much Prince Xizor's assistant is how I was taking it. And yeah, doing my research, it turns out that she's an assassin, which apparently I did not know. So I did not see that in the comic. She's kind of like doing everything that Prince Xizor says to do. And then like the one big moment I think that she has.
No, she's easily dispatched by a bonk on the head from Leia.
Leia gets the drop on her when she opens up a door. And that's about the end of that.
Interestingly, Guri is apparently the focus of the sequel comic series they did a few years later, which I have not read. And it was actually written by Steve Perry, the novelist.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Who I think probably wanted to explore that character more because he clearly had more to say about her in the novel than they did in the other parts of the multimedia project.
Right. Then we have Jix, which I don't think we get his full name in the comic, at least as far as I know, but I have it written down here as Renga Jixton. Can you give me an idea who this guy is?
Hey, I'll be honest, you know as much as I do because I don't think this character appears in the novel. The comic series focuses much more on Boba Fett and the bounty hunter stuff.
Yeah.
Some of that's in the game as well, but I think he was probably created for this comic series to give a perspective on what's going on with the hunt for Solo and Boba Fett trying to get him to Jabba's palace and stuff. But he's an agent of Vader, right? And he's been sent as almost like a spy into the Jabba Jabba's or onto Tatooine to like figure out what's going on. When is Han Solo showing up? Does he actually make it there? Stuff like that.
Yeah. He part of the swoop gang. I think he ends up being just kind of like. So, and then we have, I'll get these couple out of here. There's not really much we got to say about them because they're pretty well known. R2-D2 and C-3PO do show up in the book. It's not very long. I don't think they have huge roles. They do fly the ship sort of out of there at the end, but or at least get it to the guys who are escaping. But and then we have Wedge Antilles.
Oh, yeah.
Rogue Squadron's got to show up. This is that's a big deal. And
this is the peak of Rogue Squadron because Wedge and Rogue Squadron became a big deal when those video games came out in the early 90s.
Yeah.
And I think that's why he's maybe given a little more. He's in the book some.
I'm sure
he does show up in the video game sort of, but the video game is where Dash Rendar does all his stuff. That's the character you play as in the video game, and you do see some other characters and stuff. But yeah, Wedge showing up is always a treat.
Yeah, and I'm sure at this point, I don't know how far they are into X-Wing or the Rogue Squadron books. I know they might be in the double digits by this point. I can't remember, but yeah, they've got to get him in here. And then tell me what you think of any of the rival bounty hunters that we get here. So I think IG-88 said this, right?
Yep.
Bosk, Zuckus, and 4 LOM or 4 LOM.
I've never heard it said outside of like me and my friends talking about it. So yeah, it's cool to see them show up. I've read some of the bounty hunter comics that Marvel has put out in more recent time, and a lot of those guys show up in that, battling with not so much with Boba Fett as a character I think that they created just for that series. It's like a half cyborg, like a half droid, half human bounty hunter guy. But yeah, the bounty hunters, you really just saw them for like 8 seconds in Empire Strikes Back, except for Boba Fett. When you see them collected there and Vader giving the instructions on what he wanted, the rebels he wanted to track down and stuff. But
right.
They actually get to do a little bit in this series, which is neat to see. But yeah, they're scummy bounty hunters. There's not really a lot to say about them. Bosk is the coolest looking one because he looks like a reptile.
Yeah.
A reptile man. 4-LOM is a droid. IG-88 is also a droid and looks pretty much like the character from The Mandalorian that was voiced by Taika Waititi.
Yes.
I forget the character name in that series.
I know which one you're talking about too, because anytime that one showed up, that droid, whatever that droid was, I was a fan.
Yeah.
I was cheering them on. There's a snapshot of some of the characters we're going to be talking about, and unless you got anything else, I'll go ahead and get into the summary of our first 3 issues, and then
let's go.
All right, here we go. In the aftermath of Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, and leading into Return of the Jedi, Shadows of the Empire opens with the Rebel Alliance on the run, still reeling from their defeat at Hoth. Now, step in here if I got anything incorrect. I remember, obviously, Hoth is the beginning, right? Like, that's at the beginning.
Right, but I think what it means is, like, that was the Rebel Alliance's big plus, because everything in Empire sort of happens almost like
outside of, like,
seemingly within days after Hoth. So, like, there hasn't been any big war stuff since Hoth.
Gotcha.
When this picks up.
Okay. So
as far as the big picture of like the galactic struggle and stuff like that.
Yeah, because we're dealing with Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon and them they end up in, is it Bespin or something?
Yeah, it's just them on the run and then Luke going to see Yoda until this.
So as Luke Skywalker struggles with the emotional fallout of learning Darth Vader is his father and adjusts to his new mechanical hand, the rebels fend off an Imperial assault thanks to the Rogue Squadron. Meanwhile, Luke keeps his revelation secret, growing increasingly distant. Like, he hasn't told them what he found out. He's, like, keeping that to himself, and it's bothering him.
Yeah, and he probably, I don't know how much they address it in the comic. I don't think they really do. But, like, I don't think Luke really knows for certain if that is true until he talks to Yoda in Return of the Jedi, and it's confirmed.
Right. Now, elsewhere, Darth Vader reports to Emperor Palpatine, who reveals a new secret plan tied to the Endor project, one that even Vader isn't fully privy to. Enter Prince Xizor, a powerful crime lord connected to the Black Sun Syndicate, who begins maneuvering behind the scenes to eliminate Luke and gain favor with the Emperor. At the same time, Boba Fett transports Han Solo to Tatooine, but is ambushed by the assassin droid IG-88. After a brutal space battle, Fett emerges victorious but badly damaged, forcing him to seek repairs for Slave One elsewhere, hinting that the hunt for Solo is far from over. Shadows of the Empire #2 escalates the tension as Darth Vader, frustrated in his pursuit of Luke Skywalker, puts a new plan into motion by placing the rogue agent Jix inside Jabba's criminal network. Vader anticipates Luke will attempt to rescue Han Solo and wants eyes on the inside. Meanwhile, Prince Xizor advances his own agenda through his deadly enforcer, Guri, setting bounty hunters loose with the intention of killing Luke and framing the Empire. Now, see, again, it felt like he was doing some stuff that was, it says framing the Empire here, but I really...
It's not always clear what his motivations are.
Right.
What his plan is exactly.
Right. Now, on the planet Gaul, the rebels attempt a risky maneuver to intercept Boba Fett, whose ship has been damaged. With help from mercenary Dash Rendar, Lando leads a covert approach while Luke and Rogue Squadron engage Imperial forces in space. The plan collapses under heavy resistance. Sabotage within Rogue Squadron. There was a situation where one of the Rogue Squadron started targeting another one of their own, and they realized, like, shortly after, somebody had messed with the computers or something like that. The Empire is, like, right above here, so they've got to retreat. They got to get the hell out of there. And this gives a window for Fett to turn around and escape with Han Solo. The issue closes on Tatooine, where Jix proves himself to a swoop gang leader by the name of Giz, folks. Giz.
I hope it's Giz.
Gains access to Jabba's operation, bringing Vader's plan one step closer to fruition. As Shadows of the Empire #3 unfolds, multiple factions collide as the hunt for Luke Skywalker intensifies. Jabba the Hutt dispatches the swoop gang to kill Luke on Tatooine, but the mission quickly spirals into chaos when Luke evades them through Beggar's Canyon and receives unexpected help from Dash Rendar. Meanwhile, Jix, secretly working for Darth Vader, sabotages the gang from within, ensuring that Jabba's plan fails while maintaining his cover. Elsewhere, the larger galactic stakes come into focus as Bothan spies uncover critical information about the Empire's secret indoor project, with Prince Xizor quietly manipulating events by feeding intelligence to both sides. At the same time, Boba Fett's journey to deliver Han Solo is threatened when the droid bounty hunter Forlom signals Bosk, leading to an ambush that leaves Fett outnumbered and under fire. By issue's end, the story widens into a full-scale power struggle, setting the stage for major conflicts between the Empire, the Underworld, and the Rebel Alliance. All right, so there you go. That is the first 3 issues of Shadows of the Empire. You've already talked a little bit about this, but give me your thoughts on the introduction here to Prince Xizor, and maybe compare it to what we're used to as far as major villains go in the Star Wars universe. So compare it to Vader or something like that. What's your thoughts?
Not as iconic as the first appearance of Vader, certainly. It's interesting, like in the comic, we see Vader initially talking to the Emperor through a hologram, through that transmission, like you see in the movies.
Yeah.
And it is not revealed until after the conversation is over that Xizor was there listening the whole time. I think in the novel it's reversed, where it's from Xizor's perspective in the throne room with the Emperor as the Emperor talks to Vader, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
This works in the sense that it shows you not necessarily the personality, but like the angle that Xizor's working, which is like subterfuge. Like Vader doesn't know he's even in the room. He knows he's there, but so it shows how like underhanded he's being and stuff. And before we even see him, we see Vader questioning the idea of bringing Black Sun and Xizor into the plans that the Emperor has, and then he's tut-tutted and cowed down. I also wanted to mention this is the first time I think that we've ever seen like Palpatine and Vader sort of at odds. Like we only really in the movies only saw Vader as a subservient. He's the master,
right?
Emperor's my master, and everything until the end when he betrays him.
Right.
But here we see how Vader is not necessarily taking everything the Emperor says at face value. He's questioning stuff, and the Emperor doesn't like it, obviously. And that's something that we see a lot more of, like in the modern Marvel Vader comics.
Yeah.
It's clear that the Emperor and Vader are not always seeing eye to eye and stuff.
So Xizor, I did want to say here, the Empire's clearly the big bad here that everybody is always talking about. So now we like every time the Black Sun gets mentioned here in the earlier parts of these issues, it's like, man, you do not want to mess with them.
Yeah.
You do not want to mess with those. Those guys are bad news.
Yeah, in a sense, it's almost like the way people talk about drug cartels. Maybe.
Right. That's
Hey, look, don't get on those guys' bad side.
Stay out of that business. What are you guys doing? Asking for help from them? Later, as we figure out when Leia heads there, you're really worried about like what's going to happen with her. All right, so let's talk about Boba Fett here in these first 3 issues and how he's characterized. If Boba Fett from the movies, I feel like the Boba Fett you get here might be a little bit different. And when I say that boy, he talks a lot.
Yeah.
He just talks a lot. Go ahead.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like he's talking to himself because
Yeah.
he's talking to Han, who's frozen in carbonite and can't hear him. But it's just him talking out loud and talking to Han. He does, in the movies, he's silent assassin.
Yep.
Basically,
Yep.
We see a lot more of him, a lot more verbiage out of him in this book.
Yeah. I don't know what he was like in the Star Wars comics from early Marvel.
Right.
But again, this is Dark Horse, and Dark Horse is going to have their take on him. But it was...
And I feel like there was a lot of Boba Fett in those. I didn't read a lot of those Dark Horse Star Wars. Like I've said, I think on other episodes we've done, like I rarely care to read comics that are based on other mediums. Like I never think they translate. Right. I hardly ever think they translate very well to comics for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. So even though I was a huge Star Wars fan, going back to as far as I can remember, I still never really cared much about reading those Star Wars comics. Occasionally I would check out some of them, but not all. And even the Marvel stuff, like I was really excited when Marvel got the comics license and started producing newer comics, but because they had like Jason Aaron was writing it, and
right.
Stuart and John
right.
Cassidy, like big names. And then pretty quickly they were like, well, people are going to buy these because they're Star Wars. We don't have to put our best creative teams on it. And then I lost interest even in those. But anyway, yeah, I think Boba Fett was probably in a lot of these Dark Horse era comics. And there's only so much you can do with a guy who just stands around looking cool.
Yeah.
In a comic, And
then we get to kind of like you were talking about, this helps flesh out some of these bounty hunters, not only Boba Fett, but some of the other guys that were standing around there for 8 seconds in the films.
Yeah.
We get to see Bosk, and he's like, he feels almost kind of like the leader here, shouting some orders, but everybody is trying to get their hands on this Han Solo, this carbonated Han Solo. And Boba Fett's just trying to stay alive and get away from these guys. And then he's trying to figure out, like, what am I going to do? At the end of these issues, I think Slave One is either getting boarded or it has been boarded, and he's in real trouble. So, yeah. But I think the Boba Fett story... when I was in these 3 issues, I was like, okay, well, this is interesting. I think it gets better here in these last 3 as we get through and some of the stuff that he does trying to figure these guys out. And then we have Jix. So Jix shows up here. He's the agent of Vader. He's put into the swoop gang. Well, he goes down there and finds some guys who are working for Jabba and then inserts himself into the gang. This is a neat element to the story. I don't know if you have any thoughts on Jix and his part of what's going on here.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think he might only appear in the comic series. If he does show up in the novel, and I just have forgotten, forgive me. But in a way, it almost seems like, I was going to save this for the end, but I'll just say it now. It feels like the comic might have been better if they had just concentrated on the Boba Fett stuff and the stuff with Jix and the Swoop Gang and Jabba and all that stuff, and just barely touched on the stuff with Luke and Xizor and all the other. Just because, like, it leaves so many questions when they have to like be like, yeah, this happened, so we're able to just go through whatever, like what would have been a hindrance, like, oh, don't worry, Dash took care of that. So
Right.
so many references to stuff that happens elsewhere that it's annoying. If they had done like 4 issues instead of 6 and just concentrated more on the Tatooine stuff and the Boba Fett stuff, I think that might have made for a better series. And I wonder how much like communication was it John Wagner?
Yeah.
Had with like Steve Perry and what he was doing. Did he get to read the novel in advance of writing the comic? Like, how did that all work? I'm not sure.
Yeah, you have to think that they would have had some type of, like, if they weren't talking, there was some pass between the two to say, like, okay, hey, here's my big beats. And if you want to focus on these guys, it would be fine. And I agree with you. I think that taking out the Luke stuff, and we have the plans that are on there, and we do have the big blow up at the end of issue 6 where Xizor gets his, but yeah, I agree with you. I think it'd be better if we just, this is Boba Fett on his way to get Han to Jabba, and that would have been fine. Yeah, you could have capped it a couple issues earlier. So yeah, that's a fair point, and I think I agree with you there.
Yeah, and I think all of the best stuff in this series is like the action with Boba Fett and the other bounty hunters, and so like focusing more on that would have just been, we're getting the best of it.
Right. My other notes here, and I think I'm about done with my notes here for these 3. Yeah, I mentioned Giz, and I definitely wrote down that's a hard G, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
There is a moment where he's yelling out, they're trying to get Luke, and Giz yells out, "Blow his bones."
Yeah.
I was like, what the hell are you? What?
I took note of that as well.
I love the Beggar's Canyon thing as far as they're chasing them through the canyon. And of course, the environment becomes a weapon as people are flying off into parts of the canyon and bikes are getting wrecked. Jix has a moment in there where he's trying to fit in with this gang. So there's always like a risk of him. Now the order's been given, go kill Luke Skywalker. Vader is like, Jix, don't kill Luke Skywalker. He can't. I want him alive. So Jix is trying to fit in with these guys. He's taking shots, but he's purposely missing, not hitting Luke. And then Jix
trying to Jix bumping into Giz and throwing a wrench into things. Yeah.
Yep. And then I think there's a moment where I think Giz has Luke right in his sights, and then Jix picks up a rock and kills him. So he kills the guy dead. But yeah, I think that's all my notes. It's a good first 3 here. We're getting into what's going on. Did you have anything on your end there?
One thing I wanted to mention, especially the 1st and 6th issues, the covers are incredible.
Oh, yeah. Which, by the way, our cover artist, I did not mention for some reason. What is his name? Do you have it there?
Yeah. Q Fleming is the cover artist.
Yeah. There's a lot of like realistic renditions, I think. It feels very movie-esque. But
yeah, he's clearly trying to evoke Drew Struzan, the movie poster artist who died recently, who did the Star Wars movie posters. Like the 1st and 6th issues specifically are like more like movie posters. The other issues are more like reflective of what's happening in the actual comics. But especially issue 1 and I think issue 6 is more of like what you would see in a movie theater.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I noticed I think Drew Struzan actually did the novel cover, which is also pretty sweet. On the novel, you can see he just painted an image of Luke from the movie, like from one of the movies. On this one, you can see that image of Chewie is burned into my brain because it's clearly from Empire Strikes Back when Chewie sees Vader standing at the banquet table when they first realize they've been betrayed and he's growling at Vader. Mm-hmm. But I love these covers. They're really sweet.
Yeah, I agree.
We mentioned earlier the Rogue Squadron and Wedge. We get to see them in action in the 1st issue, and then they come back later. I like on the art from Plunkett, the hand-drawn effects lettering for the sound effects and stuff. They look very hand-drawn. They don't look like they were produced like by computer. They don't look like they were done necessarily by even a letterer. Maybe that the letterer did those himself. Dave Cooper was the letterer, or it looks more like the Plunkett may have actually done those. I'm not certain. There is some iffy computer effects, which a lot of the mid-90s comics have, especially.
Oh, I didn't notice where we're at.
Well, it's usually stuff like smoke, like there's a sheen to some of that stuff. Smoke, laser fire, some of that stuff. It just has like a computer effects like sheen around it.
This would be the time that they would start messing with things like that for sure.
Yeah, and it's minimal. They don't use it a lot, but it is noticeable to me when I see it in here. And I think it partially might be more noticeable because I'm reading it on the Marvel app, so I'm going through panel by panel. They blow up the panel so it's even more obvious when stuff like that shows up. I took note of IG-88 when he's trying to take Boba Fett. He's only giving him a 30% chance of survival, even if he surrenders. I don't like those odds, buddy. I think I'll just take my chances fighting you off if I'm likely to die anyway.
Right.
When Lando shows up, he's still sporting Han's clothes.
Yep.
From the end of Empire, which they made hay of in the Blue Harvest, the Family Guy Star Wars parodies. Have you seen those?
No.
Especially the first couple. And yeah, there's a bit in there about Han or about Lando wearing Han's clothes. I would have liked to have seen more Dash Rendar in this series. Again, he takes the center stage in the video game, and he's a joke, I think, to a lot of people. I love the character. Like I said earlier, just a knockoff of Han Solo makes him awesome.
Yeah, he pops in and out like at some random times too. Like, oh hey, there's Dash again, and then he's gone. And they're like, well, you ought to stick around, help the rebellion. Not for me. Then he comes back.
She shows up again 30 pages later.
Right.
I love seeing all the action from Boba Fett. Salacious Crumb pops up in Jabba's palace. It's always nice to see him.
He's the big ear.
Lizard monkey.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Yep.
He's like Jabba's little pet.
That's right. Right.
And of course, like you mentioned earlier, Beggar's Canyon, Luke's on his home turf there because he made note in the first Star Wars movie of how he likes to bullseye womp rats. At Beggar's Action at Beggar's Canyon.
Right.
That's pretty much all I got for those first three.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead. We'll get into the next three here. Sit back and relax. I've got this one's a few paragraphs, but let's get into here. So issues 4 through 6. We open with a tense showdown in space as Boba Fett is ambushed by rival bounty hunters under Bosk, all vying for possession of Han Solo, still frozen in carbonite. Fett quickly turns the tables, using the intruders as leverage before escaping into the guts of Slave One, picking them off one by one. In a calculated move, he rigs Bosk's shuttle with explosives, sending it back as a Trojan horse that detonates upon arrival, crippling Bosk's ship and allowing Fett to jump to hyperspace and continue his journey to Jabba the Hutt, but not without earning a powerful enemy. Meanwhile, political intrigue deepens as Prince Xizor reveals to Emperor Palpatine that he is orchestrating a massive deception, feeding the rebels Death Star plans to gain their trust, only to betray them later. On Kothlis, Luke Skywalker is ambushed and captured by bounty hunters who reveal competing bounties, one for him alive and one for him dead, highlighting the chaos surrounding his value. Elsewhere, Princess Leia infiltrates Xizor's inner circle on Coruscant with the help of the deadly droid Guri, only to find herself strangely drawn to the mysterious crime lord, which, by the way, Guri's not helping like Princess Leia infiltrate in any way. Guri's just taking her, Princess Leia and Chewbacca, to Prince Xizor's. Either way, Leia is heading there, and their idea is to meet with Xizor and also get some idea of what Black Sun's up to. When she gets down there, she finds herself strangely attracted to this green-skinned man, and she can't even understand it. The issue closes with Luke using a Jedi mind trick to escape captivity while Darth Vader is dispatched to Kothlis, setting the stage for a major collision of forces. On the ocean world of Kothlis, Luke Skywalker fights for his life after escaping captivity, reclaiming his lightsaber, and cutting through a squad of bounty hunters who are now under orders to kill him. Just as he's about to be overwhelmed, a well-timed explosion signals the arrival of Lando Calrissian, who rescues Luke and rushes him back to the Millennium Falcon. With an Imperial fleet led by a superstar destroyer likely carrying Darth Vader entering the system, the group jumps to hyperspace, setting a course for Tatooine. Meanwhile, on Coruscant, Princess Leia and Chewbacca attempt to infiltrate Prince Xizor's Black Sun organization, but Leia quickly finds herself under the influence of Xizor's powerful pheromones. Despite her love for Han Solo, she struggles to resist his advances until Chewbacca intervenes, pulling her away. Realizing they are being monitored, the two begin to consider an alternate plan, while Chewbacca secretly sabotages the facility. He goes a bit on a rampage. And I don't know if he's trying to get away and they're trying to stop him, but either way, he's taking out these Black Sun soldiers or thugs left and right. Now, Xizor, he's fairly confident in his control over Leia, and he's allowing these events to unfold. I think at one point he talks to somebody and he's like, did the Wookiee escape? And did you make it at least seem like we were trying to keep him here? So he knows what's happening. And he's also thinking like, go ahead, send Leia back to her quarters. She'll be mine before long. So he thinks he's going to be able to convert her or at least make sure that she will ultimately return to him.
Fine line between confident and cocky.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Elsewhere, Darth Vader arrives on Kothlas and interrogates the surviving bounty hunters. Again, this is where Luke Skywalker just escaped and Lando Calrissian laid them all out with a big explosion. But yeah, he interrogates these surviving bounty hunters and quickly finds that Xizor may be attempting to undermine him by targeting Luke Skywalker for death. At the same time, Boba Fett is still transporting the carbonite frozen Han Solo. He's preparing for further conflict, keeping a captured bounty hunter as leverage. He keeps Zuckuss, I think, on his ship, and he's like, I think he's planning on using him as some bargaining chip, if I remember correctly. Yeah, something like that. All right. Now, on Tatooine, Vader's agent Jix eliminates a suspicious guard and successfully transmits some intelligence back to Vader, or at least talks to Vader. I think he's able to do that, if I remember correctly, because he kills a guard and takes like this code book, and he's able to talk to Vader and give him an idea of what's going on. The issue closes though with Luke and Lando piloting the Falcon into the crowded Imperial space above Coruscant. Luke Skywalker, Organa, Lando Calrissian, Chewbacca, and Dash Rendar. Dash Rendar's here. He showed back up. They are infiltrating Prince Xizor's stronghold through the sewers, battling guards and evading detection. After Luke senses Leia through the Force, the team reunites with her. There we go. But quickly discovers they've walked into a trap. Outnumbered, they resort to desperate tactics, using thermal detonators to force an escape as the palace erupts into chaos. Meanwhile, the Millennium Falcon, piloted by C-3PO and R2-D2, barely survive a rough getaway. The team escapes just as Xizor's castle base is destroyed in a massive explosion, though Xizor himself initially survives and attempts to retaliate by unleashing his fleet. So I should say C-3PO and R2-D2 flew down and got the team. So everybody is on board the Millennium Falcon and they get out of Dodge, but while the palace explodes behind them. In orbit, a full-scale battle erupts. Dash Rendar returns to aid the Falcon in his Outrider, calling in Rogue Squadron to even the odds. The conflict escalates further when Darth Vader intervenes, declaring Xizor a traitor. When Xizor refuses to stand down, Vader's like, all right, take him out. Vader takes it out. Vader says, okay, because Xizor doesn't answer him, and so Vader causes it to explode. Refuses to stand down. Vader orders the destruction, eliminating him and dismantling the Black Sun once and for all. We'll put that in quotes because I don't know. Maybe the Black Sun will come back in Avengers Doomsday. Who knows? During the escape, Dash appears to be destroyed in the crossfire, sacrificing himself to ensure the others survive. That's a question mark there because surely not. You can't get rid of Dash Rendar like that. Which it's crazy how he dies. Like,
yeah, they don't show it. They just show the reaction of Luke watching it.
Yeah, and like Luke says something like really just like unsympathetic. I wish I could remember what he says. It just felt like, man, that was not like a hero's send-off in any way. I can't remember the dialogue.
He says, poor guy, he almost made it too.
That's okay. All right. Well, all right. Anyway.
I think in the novel, it seems more clear that his ship exploded. At least that's what they thought. As you alluded to, he may fight again.
He may fight again. All right. Well, back on Tatooine, Boba Fett outmaneuvers. This is such a horrible description of the awesome stuff that happens with Boba Fett. But anyway, back on Tatooine, Boba Fett outmaneuvers rival bounty hunters Bosk and the others as well, using decoys and misdirection to safely deliver Han Solo, still frozen in carbonite, to Jabba the Hutt and claim his reward. And in sights on rescuing Han aboard his superstar destroyer, Vader reflects on recent events. Xizor is gone. The Death Star's reconstruction continues, and Luke's power is growing, fueling Vader's determination to turn his son to the dark side. And that is where we end Shadows of the Empire. All right, can we just real quick, for my notes, do you think and this might have been different on the Marvel app, I don't know, is Xizor's coloring changes?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's intentional. Yeah.
That's what I wondered, because I was like, there's a boo-boo here. Because in the moments when he's hanging out with Leia, his skin tone, which is essentially green this whole story right up until then, changes to normal human skin tone almost. So
right.
I wondered if that was intentional. They definitely do not explain that in the book, other than the fact that he's just got these, I put pheromones in here, that's not mentioned. I think Leia calls it something completely different, but it's a situation where he has a way of using to make her attracted to him.
Yeah, that's part of the novel that is a lot more expanded on in the book. It's pheromones. I don't think it's just him. I think it's a species has that ability.
Okay. And
he can seduce any woman because it makes these pheromones he secretes make him irresistible. And although it's not called out specifically how Leia is able to fend him off, it's simplified in this comic, but in the novel, it's heavily implied that it's her latent force powers that are assisting her into getting over this attraction and staving it off.
I thought
he doesn't know at this point in the story that she is Vader's daughter or stuff like that. But,
right. Well, I thought it was just all the practice she had with making Han Solo feel.
Yeah.
She
look, Han couldn't.
Right.
Think you got a chance.
That scoundrel, and you think you got a chance. Man, she delivers a straight up knee to his nuts too, which is hilarious. I want to say somewhere, maybe I listened to a podcast or maybe I read it somewhere. This was years ago about how Xizor is problematic because of the way he treats women. And it's like he's a bad guy. Yeah, so. It's a very rapey quality that this guy has.
Yeah, I was going to say he's got a real fucking rapey vibe.
Right, dude.
Quote Danny McBride from the end. So, yeah, that's bugaboo some people have with Xizor as a character and stuff, but
there's something I was reading about how, and you can tell me if this is true or not, it's barely touched on in the comic, but might be explored a little bit more in the book, where Luke gets his lightsaber going. So do they devote a lot of time to him rebuilding his lightsaber or getting the feel of the lightsaber?
I feel like they go through at least a handful of paragraphs talking about him rebuilding it or about him building it and learning how to make it and stuff in the novel.
Okay.
Definitely more time than they do in the comic about it.
Do we get an explanation of that in the movie at all? Because he comes back with a green lightsaber, right?
Right. And he just has it at the beginning of Return of the Jedi. There is a deleted scene, which was on the Blu-rays, and I think it's on Disney Plus. Definitely on YouTube, you can see it, where there was a scene that they filmed for Return of the Jedi where he builds the lightsaber or maybe puts the finishing touches on it and then ignites it for the first time, which is before he goes to Jabba's palace. But
okay.
Right. It's just a deleted scene.
Gotcha. My other note here, Snuva, the alter ego of, oh my goodness, bounty hunter Chewbacca. That is a pretty cool rendition. Do they give him a haircut?
Oh yeah.
Because this is when they do this, I think the new artist takes over which was, oh my goodness, the second artist on those last few. I'm going up here to my creative. So we have Killian Plunkett and John Nadeau. John Nadeau takes over, I think, on these last couple issues. But anyway, the art definitely has a bit of a change when he takes over. But yeah, Chewbacca dressed up in the bounty hunter and the flat top.
Yeah.
That's they apparently, did they make a figure of that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, dude, come on.
I'm waiting on the Black Series release of that.
That's an awesome rendition of that. So that's pretty cool. Okay, we got to talk about Boba Fett and that fun, that last chase and the reveal had me. I was so just to break this down for the listeners, Boba Fett is on Tatooine. The other bounty hunters have showed up and they pretty much surrounded him. And he's trying to figure out, how the hell am I going to get out of here? Essentially, it's just going to be a race to Jabba's palace. I've got to get there as fast as I can because these other bounty hunters are going to follow me. So the next thing you see is a speeder bike drop out of Slave One, towing a floating carbonated Han Solo behind it. And you just see it take off and everybody's chasing after it. And I'm reading this thing and I'm like, oh man, how's he going to escape this time? And they end up catching up with him and shooting it. And you're like, oh, okay. And then they get up there. And the reveal is that Zuckuss, he put his helmet on Zuckuss and tied him to the bike. Because I think the first thing they see is they're like, his hands are tied to the bike or something like that. They're like, what is it? What the hell is he doing? And then they open up.
When I first saw it, they said that his hands are cuffed to the thing. I guess it was the carbonite is what I was thinking. And he's done that so they can't take Han.
Oh, yeah.
At the very least, they'll have to take him too, but that wasn't even the ruse he was going with.
Right. They pull the helmet off, and here it is Zuckuss, and they look in the back, and it's cloth-covered carbonite. They pull the cloth off of the top of it, and is it Forlom that's laying in the back on top of a grate, like a vent of some sort, a vent grate or something on top. Anyway, so yeah. It was all a ruse, and then while they were chasing him, of course, Boba Fett was able to get Han Solo. Thank you. Yes, Han Solo to Jabba the Hutt. And yeah, there's
strains credulity a little bit that he's able to get that helmet over Zuckuss's melon, but
right.
It's a good ruse. It works.
Yeah, it did. That was probably one of my favorite parts of this whole book, was just watching him actually pull one over on him and pull one over on me. So anyway, I think that's all I have as far as my notes for these last three. I'll ask you, before you get into your notes, what was your favorite part?
I think the best parts were always the Boba Fett stuff, the action stuff. I love Luke Skywalker and Lando and all those. I like seeing their parts, them in action as well. But for this 6-issue series, the highlights were always the stuff with Boba Fett and seeing him in action. You never see in the movies. You see very little of him in action, and when you do, he is quickly dispatched. Right.
Somebody hits him, he goes flying off.
Yeah, but this gives a chance to show why he had the reputation he did in the Star Wars universe and stuff like that. So that's the best stuff, I think.
All right. Well, you have the floor. Finish this out here with your notes there.
In issue 4, I also did not recognize old Batface, the bounty hunter that Boba Fett says he didn't recognize and pretty easily took care of. I think they did name him later, but I think he must have been a creation for this series.
Yeah. I looked at him too, and I was like, what is this thing? This is a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle villain.
Yeah. Chewie, you mentioned Chewie with the high top cut. That was a great look for him.
Yes.
They also mentioned that I guess they had painted they dyed part of his fur. It was a disguise, and they had dyed part of his fur. They gave him a bunch of straps and an eye patch. So that was all pretty cool.
He looked awesome.
Yeah. And we also, something we don't see a lot of in the films necessarily that we see in this is Chewie in action. He's throwing guys. We see him with his bowcaster shooting people a lot, but in this we see him manhandling bad guys and stuff and showing his Wookiee strength. Mm-hmm. I loved Lando when he showed up. He is styling. He's got the cape. No longer wearing Han studs. He's really He's a straight pimping.
Yeah, my note here was Lando clutch rescue guy once again. And he's coming in there, and I think Dash and him are competing on, like, okay, what surprise saves can we do throughout this book?
Yeah.
So, yep.
I already mentioned the Leia using her Force abilities without really knowing it. It was part of the novel. I also mentioned earlier, but it's, again, I'll reiterate, Guri is supposed to be a badass droid assassin, and Leia hits her in the head with a helmet.
Not in this comic.
Yeah.
She's just, she is useless.
Yeah. When Boba Fett finally does show up and deliver Han, immediately Jabba is trying to renegotiate, trying to shortchange him on the reward. He even, no loyalty from these scumbags. He even sent the swoop gang out with a lower bounty on Boba Fett to get Han.
Yep.
So he wouldn't have to pay Boba Fett the higher price for the reward. So,
right.
But Boba Fett gets paid, so that was cool. And I believe while he is apparently killed here and in the novel, the Shadows of the Empire N64 video game is what most of his story is told in. And he actually survives. So at the end of the video game, he fakes his... And it's not really explained why. I guess he just doesn't want people to know he's still around. Maybe because he took part in the actions against the Empire and stuff.
But I guess that makes sense. He would, in order to keep a low profile,
right?
He would probably he'd rather them not go put a bounty on his head because now he's dead. Right.
I think it's almost like a post-credit scene where it appears that the ship explodes and stuff, and then there's like, oh no, wait, he's still around, and he's never seen again in Star Wars continuity before or since, before the Lucasfilm, the Disney purchase. But anyway, so that's pretty much all I got. This is a really fun comic. Again, I don't often appreciate the Star Wars comics as much, but the art is really solid.
Yeah.
The whole Shadows of the Empire project is just a really interesting oddity, not just for Star Wars, but for pop culture in general. I think it's really interesting. Though I'm a huge Star Wars fan, this in particular has always been particularly interesting to me, this whole thing. So I'm glad we got a chance to talk about it. We didn't do panels. I did pick them out, but then I forgot about them.
Okay, if you've got them there, I did not pick any. There was plenty of goodness, there's plenty of splash pages. Like, it seemed like every issue had a splash page, which was fine with me. But yeah.
There were, I picked one for each issue, but there were some that were just like, some of the issues didn't really have any big stand, except for maybe like a big space battle splash page or something that were cool. So I'll just say in issue 1, my panel for that one was on page 13, which was a full page splash, which is the first full figure appearance, I guess, of Vader when he's walking away from the meeting with the Emperor. And he just looks that's a really cool shot. I think that's even been done in other Star Wars, almost like a homage to that. And this may be an homage to a previous as well, but it's fairly simple. It's just Vader walking through, almost like walking through a hallway almost, but it's just a really great rendition. And then in issue 6, towards the very end, we get a similar shot of Boba Fett walking away from Jabba's palace with the sun in the background behind him. That's not quite a full figure shot, but a very cool, super detailed look at Boba Fett and his very cool armor. That's on issue 6. Yeah, page 23, panel 4, the last panel of that page. So I'll just shout out those two as really cool panels. And they're mostly just shots of cool characters with cool designs.
Yeah. I found the webpage or the Star Wars fandom for Xizor's ship. So apparently a skyhook is a type of ship or outer space thing. Actually, let's just click on this real quick so I can actually give a definition. Okay. Skyhook or space hooks were repulsor craft that floated above the surface of a planet. So I don't think it's a ship. I think it's kind of like what you were talking about. It's a space station of some sort. Mm-hmm. So Xizor goes up there. His skyhook is called Faleen's Fist. Falleen, and then apostrophe S, and then Fist was the name of his skyhook. And they threw some behind the scenes stuff here, and I'll read this. This is pretty interesting. In the video game Shadows of the Empire, a different version of the battle takes place, giving Dash Rendar a major role, while a Star Destroyer is present and bombarding the station, which is Darth Vader in the comic. Dash actually flies into the Skyhook with his Outrider, mirroring the Battle of Endor, and takes out the core inside. The Skyhook appears in some cards of the 1996 top Star Wars Shadows of the Empire series in a similar appearance to that of the video game, with 4 long hollow shafts radiating from the cylindrical core towards all directions, into which Dash Rendar actually flies. This appearance is followed also in the Star Wars Galaxy trading card game. The comic Shadows of the Empire, issue 6, deviates from this depiction, where the Skyhook appears as a red space station whose main body is saucer-shaped. So just like you were saying, like Deep Space Nine. So, yeah, that helps me out a little there, understanding what the heck is going on. We don't get, they don't call it Faline's Fist at all in the comic, do they?
No.
I didn't think so.
No.
That's probably something from the novel or whatever.
The Skyhook also, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's hook shot, widely considered the most unstoppable shot in NBA history. I did want to mention one other thing. In the last issue, when Vader gives Xizor an ultimatum and threatens to blow up the Skyhook, and Xizor is defiant, and then I guess he gives him 2 minutes, and then somebody tells Vader 2 minutes have elapsed, his fleet is being obliterated, but Prince Xizor remains silent.
Yeah, there's nothing. That one made me wonder, too, what's going on? That is funny, because I remember thinking the same thing when I was reading it. I was like, that's a really stupid way to go out.
He just stopped answering.
He's like, all right, you're dead. And that is the end of Prince Xizor.
Wikipedia entry pretty much just says he was killed the way it shows in the comic. That. I could also point out this Shadows of the Empire takes place between Empire and Jedi.
Yep.
Which was an era that wasn't really looked at until this back then. And since Marvel has taken over, their initial Marvel comic book series took place between A New Hope and Empire, and their second series took place between Empire and Jedi. So all of this stuff is sort of been replaced with the new Marvel era.
Right. All right, man. Well, we did it. Let's go ahead. We'll get into plugs here. What do you have going on over there? Because movies and small screeners.
I've got a couple of movie podcasts I do with my buddy AJ. One is Small Screeners, where we talk about direct-to-video and made-for-TV movies. We also have one called Because Movies, where we cover anything we want movie-wise. You can find those on your podcatcher of choice.
Yeah, I'm in the process of, I finished up your guys' Scream discussion. You guys are doing a 2-parter, right, of that?
Yeah, we did the first movie in October, and then we did the sequels that Wes Craven did recently, released that one, and then we're going to do a third part on the modern Scream sequels once AJ has seen the seventh one. Okay. Came out recently.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, it was a fun discussion. Loved listening to it. Yeah. Well, yeah, as for myself, hey, you're listening to this on the Source Material Comics feed. You should be able to find all sorts of fun comic-related content right here. Source Material, where we talk about the comics of any era. And then we have Unspoken Issues here, where we talk comics of that primarily were in the 90s. And then also we have the Snap Material podcast, where me and Evan Bevins get together and we talk about Marvel Snap. So please feel free to check any of those out. All sorts of great episodes out there. With that being said, we're getting out of here. That's Chris Armstrong. I'm Jesse Starcher. Thank you very much for joining us. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.